Hello everyone, welcome back to TLB Station. In today's video, we'll explore how to validate a form using only CSS, without any JavaScript. You'll learn how to ensure users fill out the form correctly before the Sign Up button becomes clickable. Note that CSS alone cannot perform form validation in the way JavaScript can, but you can use HTML5 attributes and CSS pseudo-classes to simulate validation by providing visual feedback and control over form input states. Let's dive in. We will use the form we created before. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll leave the link in the description below and in the video cards above. First, let's make sure that our input fields have the correct types and validation rules. For the email input, we set the type attribute to email, which will automatically check if the user enters a valid email address. For the password, we'll set the type to password and add a minimum length attribute, for example, 8 characters. So the user must enter at least 8 characters, and make sure all fields are marked as required, meaning users can't submit the form without filling them out. Next, we make the CSS. We will use the invalid pseudo-class for all input elements. It targets form elements that do not satisfy the specified validation rules, and we will add 2 pixels red border for these inputs. As you see, the border of all the input elements turned red as they are required by default. Now we use the valid pseudo-class for all input elements. It targets form elements that have a valid input based on their validation criteria, and we will add green border for them. Now, if we entered a valid input, the border will turn green. But now all the input elements' borders are red, and we only need them to be red if the input is invalid, and they should not always be red. There's 3 ways to fix this. First, we add a condition that excludes input fields that are showing their placeholder text, meaning it prevents applying the red border as long as the user hasn't started typing, and it's now fixed. The second way is to use user invalid instead of invalid, and user valid instead of valid. Now, if we enter a valid input in a field and then move out of it, the border will turn green. And if the input is invalid and we move out of the field, the border will turn red. I prefer the other 2 solutions than this one. The third way is to combine the focus pseudo-class with invalid and valid pseudo-classes to show the validation styles for the focused input only. And here it works perfectly. And the password must be 8 characters or more. Now to make the styles for the sign up button, to make it only clickable when all inputs is valid, we will use the general sibling combinator tilde that selects the up class or the sign up button if it comes after the invalid input in the HTML structure. This also means all input fields with invalid input will apply these styles to their sibling sign up button in the same scope. Now we set pointer events property to none to make it unclickable. Then we make its background transparent as it is deactivated. It seems to be working, but there's a problem. It only works for the email and password fields. We'll fix this, but first, note that the sibling combinator plus only affects the closest input field to the button. In this case, the password field. You should use the general sibling combinator tilde instead. Now, the problem with the general sibling combinator tilde is that it works only with sibling elements or elements that share the same parent. Since the input fields for the first name and the last name are wrapped inside a parent, the div element, they are not direct siblings of the sign up button. There are 2 ways to fix this. First, we can apply the invalid pseudo-class to the form element instead of the input elements and remove the general sibling combinator tilde. And now it works well. The second way is to remove the parent div around the first and last name fields and make them direct siblings of the sign up button. This will still work with the form element, and the general sibling combinator tilde will now work as expected with all input elements. This way, the button will be affected if any of the input fields are invalid, as they will all be direct siblings of the button. Everything is now working and looking good. That's it for today. Everything is now working and looking great with our form validation. If you found this helpful, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.